We thank God for this day, this opportunity to be able to be back in the house of worship. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to stand here before you, preaching in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus the Christ, who does all things well. Got to tell y'all before we get started, I've got some thoughtful brethren and members. They checked on me all week long and praying because my team lost last Saturday. Didn't want to talk to me before the game. Somehow Monday morning, they found their way to their cell phone. I appreciate it. My team got dropped like a sack of hot potatoes in a fast food restaurant at lunch hour. But I thank them for being so thoughtful and so kind. Amen. Listen, y'all, this is just a joy and a privilege and a pleasure to be able to operate in the spirit of laughter, because there are some times life gets difficult.
Amen.
We thank God that He allows us to laugh, to be able to smile, to be able to get through each day. And I just thank God for being who He is. Listen, we got this privilege, this honor of serving so, and God grants us the ability to be able to be touched by other individuals, and I'm thankful that God uses any and everybody that He so chooses.
Amen.
With that, we just thank God for Him using us to make a difference in the lives of each other and in the lives of those individuals that we're connected to. So we just want to be mindful of that as we are still praying for individuals that are in bereavement, as we keep lifting up the Gray family as they were in bereavement last week and still there, and yet bereavement has hit another part of our family here, as the Harris family, Tate family will be laying to rest. Father, we thank God for them, praying God's strength upon them as they deal with and believing that God will give them the strength that they need to get up each day. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Listen, I want to do a quick Bible study, about 30 minutes, if y'all don't mind.
Right.
I need to do this, and as I'm being led this particular route, I need our ministers, our teaching staff, to be ready to sit down with me that first week in March, either Friday or Saturday. More important to share with you some things. Looking at either the first Friday or the first Saturday in March. Undecided, but we'll get together, kind of look at your schedule, see if it works for you, early Saturday or Friday evening. But I'll be mentioning that to you again, our ministers, our teaching staff, even if you are being tugged at your heartstring to teach here, we invite you to sit down with us as we begin to start pouring into you. I want to share with you some things that God has been showing me over the years, and hopefully it will be a help to you. There's nothing to say that anybody's doing anything wrong. But here's the thing. I'm oftentimes asked, what do I need to work on? What do I need to fix? I say that to say this, that if I start asking questions, many people go on the defense. You got to say that. But we want to be able to help any way that we can. So all of our teachers, our ministers, looking at the first Friday or Saturday in March, sit down and look forward to you some things that I hope will help as a blessing to you. Listen, Mark chapter 8. Mark chapter 8, verses 34 through 38. Mark chapter 8, verses 34 through 38. We have been studying breaking tradition on Wednesday night, and because the weather did not allow us, we kept getting alerts in terms of Bible study Wednesday. So we'll get back this Wednesday prayerfully. We will finish up Mark chapter 7, verses 9 through 13 is where we are. Today I want to share something with you. Mark chapter 8, verses 34 through 38. I'm going to read verses 34 through 38 in context, but I want to focus only on verse 34 today to open up the first part of a series in what Jesus teaches here in these 4 verses. Mark 8, verse 34 through verse 38. If you got it, say I'm there. Need a second, say wait for me. Mark 8, verse 34 through verse 38. Jesus says, when he had called the people to himself, his disciples also, he said to them, whoever desires to come, let him himself take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what will it a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? But what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man also will be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. As you're headed back to your seat, I want you to keep your book, your Bible open, and focus in on verse 33. That's where I want to centralize for this morning. It is said there, verse 34, whoever desires to come after me, let him deny self and take up his cross and follow me. I want to talk about this morning, 30 minutes or so, about the cost of discipleship. Cost of discipleship. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his book, The Cost of Discipleship, writes in chapter 1, at page 45, he writes, and I quote, costly grace is the treasure hidden in the field. For the sake of it, a man will gladly go and sell all that he has. It is the pearl of great price to buy which the merchant will sell all his goods. It is the kingly rule of Christ, for whose sake a man will pluck out the eye which causes him to stumble. It is the call of Jesus Christ at which the disciple leaves his nets and follows him. He goes on to say, costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again, the gift which must be asked for, the door at which a man must knock. He continues on to say, such grace is costly because it calls us to follow. And it is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It is costly because it costs a man his life. And it is grace because it gives a man the only true life. It is costly because it condemns sin, and grace because it justifies the sinner. Above all, it is costly because it cost God and the life of his Son. He writes and quotes and says, ye were bought at a price. And what has cost God much cannot be cheap for us. Above all, it is grace because God did not reckon his Son too dear a price to pay for our life, but delivered him up for us. That's what Dietrich Bonhoeffer writes in his book, Cost of Discipleship. But at the beginning of his ministry, Jesus sent his apostles to make more disciples. He calls them and challenges them who answered the call to put aside all that would hinder them to receive what Jesus and the Father had to offer. Jesus sent his disciples to make more disciples. As a matter of fact, in Matthew 28, verse 19 through 20, it says, to make disciples of all nations, to teach them to observe all that he had commanded. In our text, we find Jesus discussing the issue of discipleship. In the verse just before us, just before our text, Jesus shares with his audience the suffering, the death, and the resurrection that he is to experience at Calvary. And as Jesus shares his passion that is to be poured out for the people, he in turn reveals the purpose for those that would be his disciples. If there is still a question about a disciple, know that a disciple is a learner. A disciple is a follower of Jesus Christ. To be of Jesus means that we follow his entire direction. And as we read the text, discipleship has a cost. There are many who want to walk in power and authority, and that is what we should be seeking after, the people of God who follow Jesus Christ. but know that it costs to be what we call blessed. Jesus is the Lord. He's the Lord of lords. He's the King of kings. He's the great high. His name is higher than any other name. The Bible even declares that there is no other name wherewith men must be saved. That at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. But with all of that, we must know and understand that it all comes at a cost. And here Jesus shows us that desire to be his disciples, that desire to follow him. He says that we must deny self, take up our cross, and follow him. As we deal with this today, as we're looking at the overall scope for this year, our goal is for us to walk in power and authority. And one of the areas in order for us to walk in power and authority is us counting up the cost of what discipleship is cost or rendered unto us to be able to walk with Jesus Christ. He tells this crowd that he's talking to in our text, he says that if you're going to follow me, he says you need to deny self. You need to take up your cross and you need to follow me. Notice the first thing of discipleship, of what Jesus says, that it costs something. Jesus says that we must deny self. Listen, the person that comes after Jesus has to make a choice between life pleasures or eternal promises. That's the first thing that we've got to begin to decide on, whether we want the pleasures of life only or whether we want the eternal pleasures that God has to offer unto us. And Jesus says here in the text, he says the first thing that we must do is deny self. Listen, the text opens with not just the 12. It doesn't just talk to Peter and James and John and Andrew and Bartholomew and James and Judas and Thaddeus and Matthew and Philip and Simon and Thomas. But if you notice the text real well, it says that he called the people to himself and the disciples. So when Jesus calls the people to himself, he's not just talking to the 12, but he's talking to everybody that wants to follow him. Okay, will you all say this with me? He's talking to everybody.
He's talking to everybody
who wants to follow him. Okay, I want you to say this again to yourself. He's talking to everybody.
He's talking to everybody
who wants to follow him. I need you to get this, because Jesus is not just spitting something into the air. Jesus is not just saying something just to hear himself talk. Jesus is not just talking to the 12 that he's called and he's talking just to them only, but the text says that he's talking to the people that he's called to himself. So each and every one of us that are in the church, this text calls us to deny self. Okay? He's not just talking to the preacher that stands in the pulpit.
Okay.
He's not just talking to the deacon that serves in the deacon ministry. He's not just talking to the usher that serves in the usher ministry. He's not just talking to the choir member that sings in the choir. He's not just talking to the musician that plays the instruments. He's not just talking to those who just serve in certain functions and auxiliaries of the church. But Jesus is talking to everybody that wants to follow him.
Amen.
Even the casual Christian that loves to holler, I believe in the Lord, I'm a Christian, but I only go to church when it fits my schedule. He's talking to you too. Jesus is talking to the person that loves to say, when I get myself right, I'll come to church. And the first thing he said, that if you want to follow me, you got to deny yourself.
Yeah.
Listen, if we were in therapy, the therapist would right along here tell you, listen, say it out loud so that you can hear it and really grab it and understand it. And I don't know if hermeneutics and homiletics took therapy, but they would tell us that when you read the text aloud so that you're able to hear the words that are there in the text. And I need you to say it out loud one more time so that you grab it and not leave it on the pew that you're sitting on. The text says, deny yourself.
Deny yourself.
It's going to be thick for the next couple of weeks. Jesus says that if you won't follow me, he said you got to deny yourself. Listen, deny here means to disown, to disregard, to forsake, to renounce, to reject, to refuse, to restrain, to disclaim, do without. It means to subdue, to disregard oneself and one's interests. Very simply, it means to say no. But notice now, the call is not to say no to some behavior or something, but the call is to say no to self. A person that's going to follow Jesus Christ is to deny self. To deny oneself is not to do without something or even many things. It's not asceticism of separating yourself to make yourself a righteous in somebody else's eyesight, thinking that that's going to be acceptable unto God. But it is simply saying no to self, to self-rejection, to self-hatred, nor is it even disowning a particular sin. It is to renounce self as the dominant element in life.
Yeah.
Denying self suggests that we no longer become the dominant voice in our life. If we follow what Jesus is saying, Jesus is saying your opinion as it relates to you following me don't matter. Jesus is saying, I know the way that you feel when they talk about you, but he says, what I told you to do is love them anyway. Jesus says, I know that you want to get them back. I know. Listen, as a matter of fact, when you read the Beatitudes, he teaches something beginning in Matthew chapter 5. He says, it is written in the law, an eye for an eye, which literally means that if they hit me, I should be able to hit them back. He said, but I need you to understand that it is also written, love your neighbor as yourself.
Come on now.
All right. Jesus says, to follow me, deny self. Here it is. It is to place God's divine will before our self-will. And that's difficult. To say that God, your will comes first in my life. But Jesus says that if you're going to follow me, he says deny self. If a person allows Christ to rule his life, all the negative and all the positive behavior is always taken care of. Watch the text, because the Greek form of the word deny is in aggressive aorist tense, which means that the person enters a new state or condition. It means let this happen at once to begin to start denying yourself. All right. If you've been in church any amount of time, if you read the Bible, at all you come across something that says that when we accept Jesus Christ, we become a new creature. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things become new. And notice now, Jesus says that if you're going to follow me, he says you got to deny yourself. And notice now, the implication is that we don't start talking about, well, I'm going to pray about this thing. But the implication is that we begin at once to start denying self. Saying no to what we want. Can I give you some legs to help that walk?
Yes.
Because some of you don't like me right now. Give you some scriptural legs to help that walk. Jesus says we're to deny self. His will comes first. Philippians 2 verse 5 says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. The word mind there in Philippians 2 and 5 means to have an attitude, to think in a particular manner. Listen, if Jesus' will is to take first priority in our life, then that means that our mindset has to die and Jesus' mindset has to come alive. All right. And here is what the Bible right here in this text that when we deny self, it's not our responsibility to let somebody know how much we did for somebody that was in a need. We just simply do it because there was a need that needed.
Amen.
Jesus says, deny self. Can I give it a little bit more leg to walk upon? See, because there in Philippians 2:5 it says, let this mind be in you that was also in Christ Jesus. But we got to continue to read. The rest of that is what it says at verses 6 through verse 8. And I'm going to give it to you in New Living Translation because they push the hay where the cows can get it. Listen to what it says. Though he was God, he did not demand and cling to his right as God. He made himself nothing. He took the humble position as a appeared in human form, and in a human form he obediently humbled himself even further by dying a criminal's death on a cross.
Yeah.
If we understand what the Bible says about Jesus' will becoming, that means that we put ourselves in the back seat and put others' issues in front of ours and see how we can help them. Come here. That's what the text says that Jesus did for us. That he humbled himself, came in human flesh, took our sins to Calvary, and died in our place. Y'all this morning. And if we adopt that mindset, that we no longer begin to start trying to do what we want to do, but we do what the Lord wants to do, and we begin to start looking for somebody that we can help.
Come on, Pastor.
He said, deny self. And when Paul writes to the church at Philippi, he shows us just how Jesus modeled denying self. That he didn't even think it was something that he could brag about or want to brag about. That he had the same position as God. But he emptied all of that so he could come to earth and die in our place.
Yes.
Let me give it a few more legs. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17 through 18. It says, he shares with us that now as we have come out from among them, he says, be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing. And he says, I'll receive you and be a father unto you, and ye shall be my son and daughter, saith the Lord Almighty. All right. Listen, denying self means that we put some things away. Means that we say some stuff that our flesh calls out for. We say no to some stuff that we long to have, we want to have, think we can't do without. But he says unto us, separate yourselves from that. But then catch what 1 John chapter 2 verse 15, 16 says, love not the world, not of the things of the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. If that sounds familiar to you, Jesus said, but it is written that man should not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God. The devil comes back, takes him to the top of a temple, tells him, cast yourself down because your Father has given his angels charge concerning you. He says again, but it is written that thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. If you're hearing anything that Jesus said, Jesus said that the word of God ought to be priority in your life. So when the devil begins to start hitting you, that's what you use to deal with the devil. It's the word. He ain't through with Jesus because he takes Jesus to a high mountain and he shows Jesus all of the kings of the world. And it is at that point that the enemy reveals his true intention, because he tells Jesus, listen, if you will worship me, I'll give you all of this. If you'll just simply worship me. And somebody
Come on now. Come on now. Come on now.
I'm going to say it one more time so that you catch it. He showed Jesus all of the treasures of the world. All of what the world had to offer. And he told Jesus that if you worship me, I'll give you all of this. Y'all still fellowship.
Come on now.
And that's what the enemy is trying to do. He's trying to get us to worship him and give us a false hope.
Come on now.
He says that if you're going to follow me, he says deny self. Listen, because discipleship means denying self along with denying self, we must, hear this now, Jesus says, take up your cross. Listen, in the first century, the Christian counsel to take up a cross could only have been an experience of martyrdom, of dying for what you believed in. It reflected the practice of compelling a condemned person to carry the horizontal piece of the cross on which he was going to die. Where we are in Mark's gospel account, Calvary has not happened yet. But if you allow your mind to fast forward through your memories to the experience that Jesus will have at Calvary, remember that Jesus was so weak from the punishment that he had taken, but he was still able to carry the crossbeam that was placed on his back. Now, if you can imagine the struggle of carrying another person on your back, then you know how difficult that is. But when we increase that struggle, we're not using the metaphorical weight of the world that is placed on our shoulders, but use the actual weight of the world, and then remember that Jesus still carried that cross of Calvary's mountain and died for the sins of the world. Listen, we oftentimes say that it feels like the weight of the world is on our shoulder, but Jesus literally had the weight of the world on his shoulder that was represented by the cross, which was sin. And notice what the text says, he still carried his cross.
Yeah.
So what Jesus is informing his followers is that you must be prepared to carry the shame and the scorn for your sacrificial service for his slaughter because of our sin. All right. Jesus was carrying his cross, which suggests unto us as believers, by denying self, understanding that there is a cross that we all have to bear. And please understand that when Jesus carried that cross, it was not a beautiful thing to see. We oftentimes look at the cross now and it becomes a beautiful picture unto us. But the cross at that day and time was reserved for the worst of the worst. Yeah. And Jesus carried that cross, endured that shame, but he still bared up his strength and carried that cross to Calvary. Yes, so watch what Jesus says to every believer that's going to follow him. He says, not only must you deny self, Jesus says you got to take up your cross. If Jesus could take up the cross to humble sin, surely we can take up our cross and honor him. It's a daily taking up, daily being called out of your name to cherish his name, daily being shamed to share his salvation, daily putting himself down to lift up God's Son. Listen, to cheerfully receive and patiently bear every affliction and evil, however shameful and painful it might be, which is appointed for us to be able to glorify him. Here it is, to gladly endure whatever hardship we might receive in service unto Christ. Listen, can we be real? We bring scripture to life when we take up our cross. Jesus said that if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to me. The truth is, we never have to go to Calvary because that was Jesus' assignment. But every time we live to Jesus, we lift him up, and then people are drawn back into Jesus Christ. Listen, now here is the question that we've got to ask. How do we take up our cross? That we say no to sin so that the Son can be seen. So that we say no to selfishness so that the S-O-N can shine. So that we say no to lustful behavior and the love of the Savior can be shown. Listen, will you help me get this across and bump your neighbor and tell them bear your cross? Stop complaining about what folk got to say about you. Just lift up the bloodstained banner. Stop crying, woe is me, because the Lord has allowed something to happen in your life. Know that every time you bear your cross with the name of Jesus Christ, you lifted him up. And what he's doing is he's drawing somebody. Come on, Pastor. Do you realize that by you carrying your cross every day to let somebody know that, yeah, Jesus died, but he rose in my soul? Grab this, because yes, we know what the convictions say. Yes, we did some stuff that we should have been punished for. Yes, we did some stuff that we should have died for. But because of what Jesus did for us, we are labeled that we're able to go free. We're labeled that we're held captive by our sins. But because Jesus died for us, our sins have no power over us. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. You got to get this now. You got to get this.
But when you're carrying your cross, you don't have to die for your sins. All right. Y'all don't feel that.
Come on now, Pastor.
You don't feel that. See, because none of us really know what it's like to be convicted of some stuff. Some of us do.
Yeah.
To know what it feels like to be accused of some stuff, and you know you did it, and you know you should receive the punishment because of what you did. But every time your case comes up, the jury can't come up with nothing, but we gotta let it go.
Come on now. Come on now.
That yes, I was a whoremonger, but because of the blood of Jesus, they gotta let me go. Yes, I used to lie, but because of Jesus' shed blood, they gotta let me go. Yes, I lied, I slipped, I slide, I did some stuff I had no business doing, but every time the jury looks at the blood of Jesus, they gotta let it go.
Yeah.
And Johnny Cochran said it like this: if it doesn't fit, you must have quit. Y'all ain't feeling me this morning. That we must pick up our cross and bear it for Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Folks still trying to talk about what you did in 1986, and you gave it to God in 87. Ain't nobody gonna talk about it. Folks still trying to talk about what you did last year, and you gave it to God on December 31st before you got to church that night. Is there anybody in the building this morning that doesn't mind picking up your cross, throwing it across your shoulder, and let somebody know that you're walking free? Say what you will about me. Jesus handled it for me already. Bring up whatever you want to bring up about me. Jesus already took care of it.
Come on
Let
now.
the bill collector keep calling who is safe and pick up the phone and tell him my debt has been paid in full. He has been whipped, beaten, unrecognizable, but still had enough strength to bear his cross for us to go to Calvary and die. That right there should have shouted somebody. See, because you know he died, but you also know that he didn't stay dead. That he died for all hang up, but he got up the third day morning. Does anybody feel it? That yes, he died for everything I did and would do, but he rose the third day morning. Here's what Jesus said: all power in heaven and earth is in my hand. Listen, with the willingness to deny self, discipleship, it calls for taking up our cross, as well as, here's the last one, and I promise I'm gone, that we must follow Jesus. All right. Listen, follow here is to be follower or companion, to be a disciple. It has the idea to be in union with and in the likeness of. It is following Christ, seeking to be just like him. Please understand that this is not a passive behavior, but an active commitment and an active walk. It is the energy and the effort, the action and the walk. It is going after Christ, with struggling and seeking to follow in his footsteps no matter what the cost is. Following Jesus sometimes means being wrong when you're right. Following Jesus means being hit when you're only trying to help. Following Jesus means being mistreated when you pose no threat at all. Following Jesus means being patient when others are being patronized. Following Jesus means being hated when you only want to show love. Anybody in this building feeling me this morning? Family, here is one of the secrets to living in power and authority. It's denying self. It's taking up our cross and following Jesus. All that we're exposed to is possible by obeying the gospel of Christ. It's possible by observing all Jesus and his apostles taught us. It is possible by ever growing in the grace and the knowledge of Jesus Christ. Family, I close, and when I tell you that the cost of discipleship may seem rather high, but then for them to follow must deny themselves, must take up their cross, and must follow Jesus Christ. But as Jesus explains, there are only two choices, and he explains it there in verse 35. He says that one can lose his life for Jesus' sake and the gospel's, and even end up saving it. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's sake, Jesus said the same one will save you. Listen, when we consider this in view of eternity, there is only one reasonable choice, that we are to endure the cost of discipleship and receive the blessings of eternal life.
Yeah.
Family, I promise you I'm out of your ear, because these are some of the blessings that we can have in receiving eternal life by understanding the cost of discipleship. That regardless of what is brought up about you, it has no bearing on your relationship with Jesus Christ. Regardless of what you've done in your past, it still has no weight to condemn you to hell. Regardless of whatever you have found yourself in doing so low to the bottom of the barrel that you couldn't see your way up, it has no bearing on where you will spend eternity.
Amen.
Preacher, how can you say all of that? Because I told you before I got here that Jesus bare the cross, that he went to Calvary to die for our sins. You missed your shout. Because of everything that you did in your life, when you accepted Jesus Christ, he blotted out everything that you have done. He has already covered everything that you will do. And as a matter of fact, he's covering up everything that you're doing right now. Is there anybody in the building this morning that's thankful for what Jesus did? It cost him to be able to give us a life of freedom. It cost him to be able to give us liberty. It cost him to be able to give us a right to be able to say that we are children of God. It cost Jesus Christ to be able to have a name that's above every name. It cost Jesus Christ to be able to have the title that he's Lord of Lords. It cost Jesus something to be able to have the title King of Kings. It cost Jesus something to be able to have the title that he's Alpha and Omega. Is there anybody that's thankful that Jesus paid the cost to hold those titles? Anybody thankful that Jesus paid the cost to be the boss? Anybody thankful that Jesus Christ did what it took to be the Lord of the earth, to be the Lord of the world, to be the Redeemer of those who would find themselves in a place that needed to be brought back from sin? Well, I don't need nobody else to say nothing. I can say it all by myself. I was stuck in the muck and mire, but I'm thankful that Jesus Christ paid my debt. I was lost, headed for hell, but I'm thankful that Jesus saved my soul. I was headed for the gallows, supposed to be dying, but Jesus died in my place. But here's what I'm really thankful about, that even though he died in my place, he did not stay dead. Because if he had stayed dead, then that means I should still be dead. Anybody know what I'm talking about? That we used to live a life of degradation, that we used to live a life in the darkness, that we used to live a life of deception, that we used to live a life of not doing what we were supposed to be doing. But we're thankful that right now I can live my life looking to be able to go to heaven, that I can live my life now looking to be able to see Jesus' face one today, that we can live our life looking to hear Jesus say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. I know we still got some hang-ups. I know we still got some flaws. I know we still got some shortcomings. But I put my cross on my back and say, yeah, I used to do it. Yeah, I did it in the past. Yeah, I had that fault. Yeah, I had that flaw. But Jesus has got me now. He went to Calvary for me. He died for me. He took his head for me. He took nails for me. He took rivets for me. He took a spear for me. He died for me. I'm thankful that he rose for me. Anybody thankful that Jesus rose for me? I'm talking about rose in your soul, rose in your heart, rose in your mind, rising in your actions now, rising in your talk now, rising in how you love now, rising in how you react now, rising in how you respond now, rising in everything you do. He's still rising on today. I don't care what we do. If we're going to follow Jesus, it's not about paying money. It's not about singing in a choir every Sunday. There were some who sang and really don't mean it from their heart, and really don't care if the song is sung right. There's even some preachers who are standing in the pulpit Sunday after Sunday, don't care if nobody's soul gets saved or nobody's life is transformed. But Jesus said that if you're going to follow me, he said, you got to deny yourself.
Yes.
Not my will, but Lord, your will.
Your will.
He says if you're going to follow me, you got to take up your cross. Bear the shame and the burden of being called a Jesus freak. Bear the shame and the burden of being called holier than thou. When I just simply want to help you get out of this hell so we can all go to heaven. Bear that burden and the shame. Then he says, follow me. That's the difficult thing for many of us. We can quote the scriptures. We can sing some of the songs. We can even point folk to the actual book, the chapter, and the verse. But the problem comes in that is when the Lord is speaking to us, tells us to love one another.
Yes.
Lord, back
Teach.
in 1975, she did this to me, and I just can't let that go. They done crossed over into glory land, and we still talking about it. We done talked about it so much that the children who wasn't even around then, they know about it and they can pick it up. We got a proverbial Hatfield in the car is going on, and don't nobody know why we fussing the fight. Feel that burning fire spirit creeping up on me. Preacher, what you talking about? Burning would say, nip it in the bud. Nip it. It comes, it starts by denying self, taking up our cross, following Jesus. That's the cost of discipleship. That opens it up. But Jesus ain't through talking about the cost of discipleship. Family, I share this with you so that we understand just how we are able to begin to walk in power and authority. Because there are some things that Jesus is getting ready to open his disciples up and us to. Because notice now, he says deny self. That means saying no to yourself. I know it's hard when you done worked all week and you seen them pair of shoes on the shelf. God has called you to do something greater than just stock up shoes in your closet.
Come on now.
I know it's hard. When you tinkering in your shade, I saw this card that I can add to my truck or my car. I can use that song. But God has called you to do something more than stockpiling. I know. Listen, I've been good at school. And Mama told me she'll take me to the store and buy the game that I want. But hear me, child. God has called you more to just be a game geek.
All right now.
Screen searching.
That's it.
God has called you more to just doing that. It begins denying ourselves.
Yes.
One of the most difficult things that we have is telling ourselves no. You think I'm lying? I've been studying some things as it relates to building wealth, saving. Come across something that's so simple. It's called the 52-week money challenge. What it is, every week you take the amount of that week and deposit it to an account or put it somewhere and don't touch it. First week, $1. Second week, $3. Third week, that should be around $5 or $6, like that. And it's suggested by the end of 52 weeks that you should be saved up around about $1,200 to $1,300. Right? Y'all miss me. Just something as simple as that. Next year, $1,300. Y'all still in field.
Yes, we do.
Some of us throw away $1,300 in 2 weeks. Okay, don't say that. Yeah, don't say that. We dealing with that Bible study. One of the things we uncovered the last session was old wise fables. What that literally means is that we have taken some stuff to be true, to have authority as the word of God. Here it is, and I promise I'm gone. My left hand itching, I'm about to get broke off. My eye twitching, money coming my way. Don't act like you ain't never heard it. Don't act like you ain't even saying it yourself. My ear itching, somebody talking about me. Here is what God is showing us. That for these things that we're hoping for in Him and through Him, to be able to receive it and to be able to maximize on it, we got to trust what He says.
Yes.
Nowhere in His word does He say that if your left hand starts itching, we're going to get some money today. He says, give, and it shall be given unto you. And good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, shall be given to you. That's what His word says. That's reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
That's you give, and it is given back unto you. I ain't gonna do that. But it's all in the spirit right now, but I ain't gonna do it. Come Wednesday night with me. It's some other stuff that we're trying to break. Because who God is beyond anything that we can fathom up from what Mama done said and Big Mama done said. God's word is true.
Amen.
We have to take Him at His word. You're here today, you don't have a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. We invite you to come and make Him Lord of your life. You can come as a candidate for baptism. You can come